Okay, we're back, round 2 for the Bearhawk fuselage welding video. It's about 10:30 at night on Thursday. Tomorrow's Veterans Day. Got the day off so I can stay up late. You can see that the fuselage is done. I've got it out of the rotisserie on the jig table. Good news to report is that it's straight. So here's what I did, and here's the setup I used for doing my welding. I have my Miller Dynasty 200DX. For most of the joints I had it set at 55 amps. For the thicker and the diameter, the thicker wall tubing and the larger diameters for the wing spar carry-throughs and also for the landing gear truss, I used 65 amps, and then up front where the bushings were for the motor mount I used 75 because that metal up there is pretty darn thick. It takes a bit to heat it up. For the argon setting I used between 15 and 17 cubic feet per minute. Set up on there, worked out great. For my TIG torch, I had number 9 torch head. It's a flex head, you can bend it any way you want. Also used a 1/16 inch tungsten, 2% thoriated, and I've got a number 5 cup on here. And I use the mid-size back mainly because if you take a regular size tungsten that comes in a package and cut it in half, it'll fit just fine underneath that particular cap. So how I actually set up the operation, I had a bunch of 1/16 welding rod. I used ER70 S2 for the welding rod. I'd take a bunch of tungstens and I had them, you can see that I had these here. If they had big goobers on them where I'd touch them and contaminate the tungsten, kind of like this one here, which happened quite a bit sometimes, especially if welding in the V's. I take them over to my fine grinder that I use for sharpening my tungstens. I grind all the goobers off, and then I've got this Sharpie that I bought from Arc Zone, and I'd polish them up with that, and it was really nice. This is not a necessity, having this old TIG tungsten grinder. It's really a nice accessory. Don't have to have it. I just have a fine grinding wheel on my grinder that's dedicated to tungstens, and that works just fine. It's just the other one is seems, for me anyway, it's more consistent. And so I'd be happily welding away. I used my foot pedal for the control and also for the grounding strap. If you remember, I had that EAA clamp that I had on the tail post, and I had this on here, and this was probably the best thing that went. This thing would turn around on the post. It never came off. It stayed there. The welding clamp or the grounding clamp rather, came off every now and again, but not very often. Not enough to bug me to where I changed the setup. I tell you what though, the cat's pajamas though, other than my skinny little stainless brush that I invented with my bandsaw, is this thing here. It's called Tig Finger Welding. I think weldingtipsandtricks.com is the place where I bought it. I just bought it. I thought it'd be a great idea, but I never thought I'd use it. But anyway, what this thing does, it's like an oven mitt for your fingers, and I used it a lot on my pinky. And the way it works is if you're welding on a cluster, for instance, that has a real long weld, or any cluster really where you're going to be putting in heat, you'd have your hand here holding your TIG torch, and you always rest, or I was resting part of my hand on whatever I was welding on to help steady it, and this kept my finger from burning. I could sit there and weld these long things, and even as I was welding along here, even going over the weld, it would get warm, but it never burned my finger. This thing, without a doubt, is worth its weight in gold. Whoever thought that up, thank you very much. It's great. So moving on to the fuselage, I left the main jig blocks intact before I put the fuselage in the rotisserie to do the final welding, so I could put the fuselage back on the jig table and just to confirm that everything was straight. And I'm very, very happy to report that everything is straight. I put it back on the table. I dropped the tail post in back here where I had left the blocks from where I originally jigged it, and I had these 2 riser blocks back here from the original jig as well, and also these 2 blocks here. and I'm happy to report the thing is absolutely straight. I couldn't be happier. It dropped just right in. There's no wobble to it. If you look down the middle, still have the alignment marks on the tubing in some places, and you go down and it's straight. It turned out absolutely wonderful. Very well blessed. Moving back here to the tail, I put the level on the tail post, and it's level in both axes, side to side and also up and down, and also everything back here lines up as well. And the best news of it all is I had to kind of reverse engineer the building process because I had a motor mount already that I bought from AvaPro, so I had to kind of build the fuselage a little bit out of sequence, the firewall portion anyway. I'm happy to report that this particular engine mount, the bolts just dropped in without any tweaking whatsoever. So that means everything is straight up here too. No bending, no nonsense to deal with as far as like tweaking the motor mount. And also it's vertical here up front as well. I checked that. So all in all, very, very pleased. It turned out great. It's strong. Oh, one thing also to mention, before I took it out of the rotisserie, I had a friend of mine who's an AI and also an A&P stop by a couple of days ago, and I had him check over all the welds. He went over it with a fine-tooth comb. Took him a little over an hour. He got a flashlight out and got a brush, and I got a roll of tape, and we started the tail and we worked forward, and he viewed every single cluster from every angle, and for every flaw that we found, we put a piece of tape on the weld that needed attention, and I took care of that tonight, getting all those things. And mainly they were either small pinholes that we found where a weld ended, or like here in a V, this may not be one here, but here in a V where there is either a pinhole in the very, very apex of that weld, or there was a little bit of a void there where the two welds didn't come together and I wasn't paying attention. But if I remember right, there was about, I don't know, between 10 or 15 little spots that we identified out of 72 different clusters. And they were very minor, and I corrected them. And he was very happy. He thought that the welds were in good shape and had no problems with them whatsoever. So there you have it. It's all inspected. It's all welded. It's flat. Now I'm ready to put it back in the rotisserie, start doing happy things like welding on gear fittings, putting on the vertical stabilizer, just all sorts of neat stuff. Anyway, thanks for bearing with me on the video, and good luck on your project.